If somebody struggles to feel their butt when they deadlift, the shortened position, or a bridge, a glute bridge, doesn't it make sense that they should open up internal, external rotation in hip extension? Because that's the deeper tissue. The hip cannot extend fully if there is no rotation within it. Okay, this is why it's a principles first approach. The principles are that if you do not have hip extension, we assess internal and external rotation in extension. If someone has pinching and hip flexion, we would have you guys do the same thing, but in hip flexion, not hip extension. Does that make sense, that line of thinking? Right? Most people train internal rotation in the 90-90. But outside of the 90-90, we don't really train internal rotation to open up joint capsule space. So the point of the video is for us to go over how do we open up internal rotation in flexion, extension, abduction, and everywhere in the middle. Does that make sense? Because when we sit in the 90-90, what are we mostly doing? Hip flexion, right? Sitting upright like that. And all people do is they stretch this, they do some squeezes, but there's no regard for all of the space outside of flexion. And we know that internal rotation is the deepest part in the hip capsule. Because it's the deepest part in the hip capsule, if we can internally rotate through all these zones, that means we have better movement across the board for external rotation, for flexion, for extension, for abduction. Right now, what am I in? Flexion or extension? Extension. Extension, think right here, okay? So, normally what are we doing in the 90-90 though? Flexion, okay? So my job right now is to give you guys more strategies, right? Interventions to how to open up the hip for internal rotation. We will do an external rotation workshop to follow up. And again, the reason it's so important is because the internal rotation influences the hip in every single position. So that means every single person here should be training internal rotation because you have a hip. Does that make sense? It is fundamental to how every single person in here moves. Does every client need internal rotation? Not necessarily. It depends on their assessment. But should every client train internal rotation? Yes. Let's get you kneeling. I'm gonna demonstrate and I'm gonna give all you guys mats and then we're gonna have a breakout. Left leg. So for you guys watching here, he's neutral right now, right? What's he gonna do? Rotate femur or rotate pelvis? He's gonna rotate pelvis, exactly. So he's gonna rotate the pelvis to me like this. Right now, he is internally rotating at the femur. He's training hip extension and internal rotation. If he were to hinge at his hip forward, he is now training relative extension. If he were to keep leaning forward, like a deadlift, an RDL, don't flex your spine, flex at the hip. Yes, adjust the pull, exactly. You see how he's now in hip flexion, right? He's essentially here rather than down here. So what I'm gonna do is put all of you guys in this position and get you into a stretch first. Just a standard static stretch like you would do for any other stretch. Then he's gonna initiate a contraction. He starts pushing his foot against the box. It looks like nothing changed, but he is contracting his hip to drive tension, force, right through his hip. Now he can do this in flexion. Now stand up tall while keep pushing. He's still contracting. You can see his shorts kind of shaking a little bit. Extend your hip more. More, 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 more. Squeeze your butt forward, butt forward, butt forward. You got more there. Yep, but keep the pressure. You see what you're doing there? And now start hinging at the hip. Not the spine, the hip. Do you see what you're doing there? Do you understand what I'm trying to get out of him right now? Right? Keep pushing. So he's in this position, and I'm trying to get him to flex at the hip, extend at the hip, while simultaneously driving into the box. He's doing an isometric contraction. Okay, that's the exact same thing as someone like doing like a wall sit or a plank, right? It's just an isometric, but for the hip internal rotation. But my goal, you can go ahead and stand up out of that. My goal though is to show you guys that we can do more for internal rotation than just sitting in this position. This is not wrong. but there's more to it, and my goal is to give you more tools. So I want everybody following suit right now. Watch what I'm doing. Initiating hip extension. Everyone found their butt. Now start pulling your pelvis in the direction of the hip. So I want you, Eiley, twisting towards me. Use the pole as support. Twist, twist, twist the entire pelvis all the way around. I want you swapping legs. You got it backwards, sir. Yeah, there you go. Twist towards me. Right there. Everybody got their stretch. Who does not feel a stretch? Everybody feels a stretch. Hold it. Breathe. I have the timer going. You guys are at a minute. I want you taking a big deep breath and trying to squeeze a little bit more out of the stretch. So if I came up and I said, twist your pelvis just a tad more, twist your pelvis just a tad more, it should feel like almost bone stretching. That is internal rotation. A little bit more. Beautiful. A little bit more. You got it. You're there. You're there. You're there. You're there. That's okay. You got more extension there, sir. Give me more. Butt forward and then rotate to me. Yeah, more extension, more extension. Use your hip, use your glute to drive that forward, yeah. You guys feel your foot having contact against the box without losing that pelvic position. I want you to imagine you're trying to externally rotate your hip. So you're pushing your foot into the box. You should feel a different sensation in your hip, a contraction instead of a stretch. So if I come up to each of you and I start trying to pull on your foot, do we feel the transition in sensation? Okay, all we are doing is opening up internal rotation in hip extension. That is all we are doing. This is one approach to it outside of the 90-90 that is so commonly done. So it's just another tool in your tool belt. Now, if I told you guys to ramp up the intensity, okay, there's volume on a TV. I have the remote. We are at the 50% mark. Ramp it up to 60% and go harder. 70%, go harder. 80%, go harder. For the last 10 seconds, I want you to go balls to the walls effort. For another 10, 9, 8, I'm gonna check every single one of you. 7, 6, give me more, harder, harder, harder. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and relax. Let's have everybody just stand up out of that and sit on the box for a moment. How often would you say programming it in? That's like once a week, twice a week? That's a good question. Normally I would say it depends. It always depends with this stuff. That's a hard answer. It depends on how responsive your hip is. If you get sore, right? And how you're progressing. I've never seen anyone need to do it more than twice a week. That's a good rule of thumb. If you can do it more than twice a week, then you are not getting enough intensity out of it. Some people have very dormant hips where they don't fire all that well. They don't feel the contraction that intensely. If someone has a dormant hip, like Kiana, I know for a while you didn't feel your hip fire that much, then she needs to like do the contraction longer to kind of ramp up the intensity. Does that make sense? And if you had like a really high level athlete in here, they would immediately feel the hip contract. And that's the, yeah, right. There you go. So what I want everybody to do now is we're gonna sit on the floor into the 90-90 and compare it. Because I want you guys seeing that the 90-90 could be an accessible setup. So from this position, I want everybody thinking pelvic motion. Internal rotation. So rotate your pelvis to me. Yep, hand on the floor. Are you able to find anything there? Okay, so right now I have everybody in internal rotation. You guys notice you don't really feel a ton of a stretch for the most part, right? You might feel some stretch. Tell me you felt more in the drills we just did. Right? Yeah. Internal rotation is like the most neglected part of the hip, even though it's the deepest part of the hip and influences everything else. That's why we're starting the workshops with this, because it lays the foundation. Make sense? I want everybody staying in the end of internal rotation. Does anybody feel their knee right now? If you feel your knee, then that is tension coming off of the hip. It has to go somewhere. If the client feels their knee, a couple interventions. Playing around with this, or lean back. What I want everybody doing is beginning a contraction. Push your foot down into the floor. So you're essentially trying to externally rotate. So if I were to come up to you guys, we feel engagement there. But you notice how it was harder for us to find than the drills we just did. Does that make sense? That doesn't mean this is a bad setup. It just means it's a setup that isn't as good as other setups. Thank you so much for watching the Bodybuilding Not Bodybreaking YouTube channel. If you found it helpful, drop a comment, like, subscribe, share it with a friend or family. That stuff really helps us in expanding our reach to popularizing this training approach, because we know there just isn't a better way to do things. If you have interest in diving deeper into the stuff you just watched, feel free to join our school community. On our school community, we have a lot of additional content. We have an exercise library that has over 200 different movement options. We have programs. We have additional videos that are concepts, lectures, and rants to give you guys a deeper understanding as to how and why we do things. We also have a discussion board where you can get direct access to coaching feedback from me personally. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok for additional updates for when we post new content. Thank you again for watching, and we hope it was of use to you.